Good morning, mushrooms. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, brothers, sisters, mothers, misters, and to all my cousins out there around the world, and to you, Cousin Simon, thanks for giving me the shout out the other day. Let's just jump in and get this party started. Well, party, hardly a party when we've got tragic news like this. Thousands have been hurt in a deadly Beirut blast. Of course, I was instantly terrified that this was going to be some sort of terrorist sort of situation, and it's still up in the air. Massive explosion of, it looks like, ammonium nitrate. That was what was used in the Oklahoma City bombing back in the 90s. The blast, we had blast up there, we got blast right here, blast right here, blast right here, and we're going to see blast yet again down below. We had blast yesterday referring to Trump blasting Dr. Birx, meaning very strong criticism. However, blast is used for explosions, and it is especially the forcible ejection of air or the shock wave then caused by the explosion, or the very active criticism that comes out of your mouth when you are rebuking somebody very forcefully. It's blamed on a store of ammonium nitrate. A store of something is a quantity of some sort of good which you have set aside and reserved for later use to be deployed when needed. Ooh, recycling that vocabulary. And so they had all of this ammonium nitrate in storage. It was a store of them, not a store that sells things, but a quantity to be used later. Let's move on. Blackouts occur when electricity is cut, intentionally or otherwise. During World War II, much of Europe and much of, well, and especially famously London, would voluntarily go into blackout with no lights, so that way the German bombers wouldn't be able to identify targets. Blackouts also happen though when power is cut for some sort of reason. In the US, it's often because of surges in demand, and especially in the summertime because everybody's air conditioners are on, and so you get the power just cuts out as some sort of circuits are tripped. There's too much draw on the circuits, and so then they automatically switch off. Also, we get brownouts when the current actually doesn't get cut, but it goes down a little bit, and so the lights dim and kind of flicker. Then we call that a brownout. However, and I'm looking up because I'm looking at the lights for whatever reason, but this is an internet blackout, and so that means the internet was cut in this Indian state. Sounds like it was cut for a reason, maybe some political purposes, to limit the amount of information that the public has access to. I've not read the article. If you do, let me know because I've got other things to do. So let's move on. Trump had a catastrophic interview with Axios, and it was an interview debacle. It was a fiasco. It was a catastrophe. It was a complete, utter, and abject failure. He bungled his answers to virtually everything, was unable to explain himself, and so on. But so yes, a debacle is a catastrophe, a fiasco, a failure. I suggest you give it a watch. Word salad and completely dodging questions, trying to explain things away without actually explaining. But let's move on to our next blast. And so in memory of Hiroshima, 75 years later, this is some sort of article about the island, the bomber, and the blast. That's because the anniversary, that's not an anniversary we should celebrate. However, well, things good and bad. Every calendar year, we are forced to revisit a lot of those things. And so now it's been 75 years, and there's still, not so much now nuclear fallout, but there still has been societal fallout as a result of that atomic bomb being dropped. Let's move on to back to India, actually. Modi is to lay a foundation stone in a divisive temple despite the coronavirus cases. And so he's going to lay a foundation stone, just like we've had in the past, groundbreaking. Often when you're creating some sort of new building, the people have a golden shovel and they will break the ground so that way construction can begin. In this case, he's laying the first stone for the temple. And to lay the foundation, we use that in other more figurative fashions as well, saying to lay the foundation for future progress. Much like the civil rights leaders of the past they laid the foundation for the Black Lives Matter movement today. If we are one of those first people, it could be some sort of groundbreaking action, and we are laying the foundation for the future. Let's move on. Speaking of Dr. Birx, as we said and saw on the show yesterday, she was blasted by Trump, And how did she feel? She was stung, much like a bee came in. It hurt. So she was stung, stung by the first public attack from Trump. So let's move on. Virgin Atlantic. We've seen this phrase on the show almost every day for a month or more. They are filing for bankruptcy in the US. And anytime we're involving forms and lawyers and so on, we use file as the verb, file for bankruptcy, because they are unable to cover or to pay their debts and obligations, their workers, etc. Next up, surrogacy is the act of working as a surrogate. But what is a surrogate? And a surrogate is basically, in a very official legal sort of fashion, a substitute. Somebody who does something for someone else. Somebody who will stand in for you if you are unable to perform some official service. Often we get lawyers to function as surrogates for us. In this case, though, there was an issue, a legal case involving a surrogate mother. And that's often when the couple can't have a child, then some other woman offers to carry the baby and then deliver the baby for said couple. I can't even begin to understand how much that would affect you to then carry a baby for 9 months just to have to give it away. So there was some sort of custody battle over who has the ownership, sorry for lack of a better term, who gets to be the caretakers and the owners of the baby. Probably the surrogate wanted some sort of visitation rights or custody of the child. I don't know. Well, it seems like that issue is over for terrible, tragic reasons. Onto something a little bit more lighthearted, thankfully. The police have identified a tourist who snapped the toes off a 19th century statue while posing for a photo. And so much like you can have a breadstick, I intended to grab a breadstick to demonstrate this for you, but just snapped off the toes of a statue. Now, it sounds like the statue wasn't very well made if the toes are just going to snap off. But to snap. Yeah, that's basically it. It's an onomatopoeia, a word that's intended to sound like the sound it is describing. And it just, and then you got the toes in your hand, and that's a bummer. And very sorry if you can hear the neighbor's dog, but hey, that's the price you pay. Let's move on to Formula One news. Susie Wolf, that's some person, says Lewis Hamilton, that's a driver, I believe. His criticism of Formula One is absolutely valid, meaning it is correct, it is not inaccurate, and so it is accurate. I've not followed this and I'm not a fan of Formula One, but if I'm not mistaken, he is the only black driver in Formula One, and I know that he was putting Black Lives Matter stuff on his car or something along those lines, and he has been outspoken and critical of the culture within Formula One racing. It's valid, it's correct, it's accurate. Ooh, and it still functions, much like my driver's license. It is valid until 2022, thankfully, at which point in time I will have to renew my license because it will have passed its date of validity. It will have expired. Okay, there we go. I knew it was resting and hiding back in my brain there somewhere, and I just found it. And so, let's move on to North Korea and nuclear weapons, everybody's favorite. Their work on the weapons has included miniaturized devices. And so, I doubt they're actually miniature. Like when we think of miniature, we think of things very, very, very small. And if we want to make something a miniature, then we need to miniaturize it, to shrink it, to make it much, much smaller. And so these are not cute, adorable little nuclear weapons. However, that means ultimately they are smaller, which is more portable. Okay. Yeah, miniature is typically cute. Miniature nuclear weapons, not so cute. Let's move on to England. A man feared murdered, found living in a woodland 5 years after disappearing. A man who was feared to have been murdered has been found living in a woodland. All right, nice, super multi-level of reduction here. And so the man, which man? The man who was feared, but wait, they weren't afraid of him. And so the man who it was feared that he was murdered, or the man who was feared to have been murdered, with the nice infinitive passive there, has been found, present perfect passive there because, well, he has been found. The quality of him now being found is still true to this moment. Interesting, and I'm just glad that he is home safe. It seems like it was not done voluntarily. He was basically hiding. He has opted out of it, and that's to decide against doing something, to choose to opt for A, to opt for B, to opt in with I click agree and accept these cookies and terms and conditions, or you opt out or opt against doing something. Yeah, that's it. It's just a nice way of diversifying your vocabulary so you don't have to say pick, choose, decide, select all of the time. Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively deeply and unreservedly sorry for their plantation wedding. They feel unreservedly sorry. Now, if we think about it, to reserve something, like you ask a restaurant to reserve a table for you, to save something, to keep it and to hold it for you. And so they are unreservedly, and that means they're not holding anything back. They're open about it, and actually, in fact, they have taken steps to, well, you could say put their money where their mouth is. They're not just paying it lip service, so to speak, and talking it. They can not only just talk the talk, but also walk the walk, because they've made several $1 million contributions to the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, also known as the NAACP, and their legal defense team. Okay, I'm rambling a bit, so let's just move on. To mock something, to mock, to make fun of, or to tease, or to ridicule somebody, often through imitation, but not necessarily, but often. Okay, fully subverted the dumb blonde cliche with their 80s excess styling. Cool. Now, Dolly Parton, the famous country singer, most famous for writing the song Jolene. At least that's the one that I know. I can't think of any of the other songs. However, she has like 25 Billboard top hits. She has also converted her estate into an amusement park. She is an icon, and she was sort of being portrayed back in the 70s as kind of like a dumb blonde, and she is not by any means dumb. And so instead of trying to explain it away or prove otherwise, she basically owned it. And so she started styling her hair super big and making and wearing super fancy dresses and so on, and taking that sort of caricaturizing the thing that she was being portrayed as sort of a to all the critics out there that were trying to make her feel bad and put her down. And so she subverted it. She undermined their attempts to portray her as the cliche dumb blonde. More power to you, Dolly. The pandemic's grasp. The grasp is the grip, its hold, and the pandemic is gripping the world. We are in the pandemic's grasp. It is holding us and it is controlling us. If you binge on something, you guys know this from the term binge watching. And to binge on something is to indulge in it or to take part in it excessively in a very short amount of time. Just like some people will binge eat or binge drink, and they just consume lots and lots and lots in a very short period of time. Yes, and so people are binge reading. I guess that's more positive than binge watching or binge drinking or any other sort of binging, unless of course they are neglecting other responsibilities that they should be doing, like taking care of their children and going to work. But it's good. People are reading. We had the controversy about cooking rice, and now we've got controversy about making tea. Science weighs in on microwaving versus the kettle for heating your water in order to make tea. And so to weigh in on an issue is it's like there's an argument going in here and you are staying out of it, and then you step in and give your opinion on something. And so science is now officially giving its opinion on microwave versus kettle for the making of tea. Ta-da! Okay, thank you, science. Hopefully you resolve this issue. Moving on to airlines. We had Virgin Atlantic filing for bankruptcy in the US up above. And this airline, for some reason, is cutting back on its COVID-19 cleanings. It's cutting it back. It's reducing it. That seems completely illogical. They probably are they trying to save on costs? I don't know, but it sounds like if you are cutting back on it, you are reducing the amount of something. If you're reducing your COVID cleanings, that sounds like you are endangering your customers, the very people who keep you in business. And so Explain yourself. Novavax phase 1 data shows coronavirus vaccine is safe and elicits an immune response. And so yes, it is provoking, it is evoking the body to do something, it's causing it to happen. Elicit, usually it's often with speaking. If you ask a question, often it will elicit a response, and so to cause it to happen. So it's causing the body to hopefully create antibodies. And wow, I just noticed, because the sun's coming through the window, it's really illuminating this side of my face in reflection off the floor, even though the sun's coming from the opposite side. Ooh, spooky. All right, but suffer a setback, suffer a brutal earnings hit, despite the overwhelming success of their Disney Prime or Disney Plus or whatever their streaming platform is, and having acquired the Star Wars franchise and all of these other different sort of things, they're still taking a hit in earnings. Yeah, even though everyone is home and watching stuff. I don't know. I'm not going to read the article though. No, climate change is real. And yes, we've got people comparing before and after photos showing how the glaciers have melted. The water has turned from a solid into a liquid. The glaciers are then melting and the runoff is going into the sea. We're losing all of that interesting ice. And I say interesting ice because it is full of all sorts of climatic data and other sort of interesting information about the past, because that ice is often very, very old. As they melt away, we say that the glaciers are retreating back up the mountains from where they came. It melts my heart. No, because if it melts your heart, that's a good thing. Oh, and last but not least, not some actual language here, but a city installs female figures on the traffic lights for gender equality. It's not the little green man, it's the little green lady letting you know that you can cross the street. Maybe the funds could be better used and to be reallocated to something else, maybe helping poor people or children in need, etc. However, at the same time, if you've got a little bit of extra budget, I think that's pretty cool. Let me know what you think. Yeah, so those are the headlines for today. That was breaking down the news for English Otherwise. If you made it this far, as you know, you can call me Cameron. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. If you like what we do, please do help us out. Click the like, subscribe. It does help with the algorithms and all of that. That's it. Have a beautiful day, and if I don't see you sooner, see you tomorrow, 8 a.m. Bye-bye.